Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Falcon Oil and Gas Limited investor Q&A session. Throughout this recorded meeting, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged. They can be submitted at any time via the Q&A tab that's just situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Please just simply type in your questions and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company will review all of the questions submitted today and publish responses where it is appropriate to do so. If I could please ask investors to hold off submitting their questions until the team have addressed those that were pre-submitted, just to avoid any duplication, that would be most appreciated by the company. And before we begin, if I may just submit the following poll. I'd now like to hand you over to CEO Philip O'Quigley. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Jake, and thank you. And hello and welcome, everybody. And thank you all for dialing in to today's IM meeting. A lot has happened actually since our last meeting, IM meeting back in October. So I just want to take this opportunity to update shareholders on many exciting developments that have taken place, particularly in relation to the drilling of the munji horizontal well. Also, thanks to all of you that submitted questions in advance of this meeting, and I'll do my best to answer all of them. So with that, I'll just hand back over to Jake and he can run through the questions.
Philip, that's great, and thank you very much indeed for that. And as you did kindly mention, we did receive a number of pre-submitted questions ahead of today's event. So perhaps if we may just start off with those, that would be great. The first question that we have here reads as follows. We see that you announced via social media that Tamrons has awarded the fracking contract to Condor Energy Services. Can you tell us a bit more about this company and why award the contract to them over one of the bigger companies such as Schlumberger?
Yeah, sure. Condor is, not a household name around the world, but certainly it's one of Australia and New Zealand's leading well services companies. And it competes pretty strongly with the more recognizable international well services companies. Another benefit, actually, it's headquartered out of Brisbane. So it's got a lot of local in-country contacts, which also is an advantage. But in terms of the award itself, obviously this is a very detailed tendering process, a lot of money involved, which is the norm for all major contracts. And Condor was, they were selected primarily because, it has the newest and the most suitable equipment for large volume, high pressure fracks in all of Australia. They have a very experienced stimulation and coiled tubing personnel globally, but also in the Northern Territory. And they have access to global technical support, providing technical assurance in stimulation design. And then last but not least, they have a very suitable and fit for purpose safety management system with a really good safety track record. So, it was a good tendering process, but they were a good winner, and we're delighted that they won it. So
that's great. Thank you very much for that. And perhaps just turning on to the next question we have here, which reads as follows. Can you tell us a bit more about the well that was drilled, cased and cemented at the end of last year? And how happy is Falcon with the results to date?
Yeah, very happy, extremely happy with the results to date. And here's why. The drilling, the casing, the cementing of the munji well, it went better than the pre-drill plan. The JV, we set out to drill a 1,000-meter horizontal section. The drilling was going so well, we extended that out to 1,275 meters. But more importantly, the horizontal section was landed well within the munji member B shale. And we got, elevated gas shows throughout that whole horizontal section. And it's really, I suppose, it's important to recognize that, this part of the operation, the drilling and the casing, it's always considered to be the riskiest. But to be honest, the guys at Tamrons, headed up by their COO, Farron Thibodeau, they nailed the execution of this operation. We could tell, looking at the daily reports every day as we get them through in the middle of the night, these guys brought great experience to this drilling operation. So yeah, answer to the question is Falcon is extremely happy with results to date.
Philip, that's great. Thank you very much for that. The next question that we have here relates to the frack design and says, what are the key differences we should be looking out for in terms of the frack design of this well compared to previous wells fracked in the Beetaloo?
Great question. One of the fundamental differences of the munji well, it's the first well in the Beetaloo that was drilled using 5.5-inch casing. And this is very significant because it'll allow our operator to attain pumping rates and pressure desired to place larger fracks than ever before. And when you combine that with, Condor's equipment, it being the newest, the most suitable for larger volume, high fracks, we are really setting ourselves up for success. And then in addition to the 5.5-inch casing, it allows, for a larger production tubing to be placed in the completed well, and that then will accommodate higher flow rates. So it's a lot of good differences than previous wells before.
Thank you very much for that. And just turning on to the next question that we have here, will the experience within the new JV, and particularly that of Tamron as operator, give us a better chance of higher success, or do you have any concerns?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and one I get asked actually quite a lot. Because anyone looking in from the outside and trying to compare, Tamron's experience with that of, the large company that Origin is, you might be forgiven in arriving at the wrong conclusion based on bigger means better. But that would be a huge mistake. What impresses me most about our new operator is the level of experience within Tamron. A lot of that is coming from the United States. But there's more than that, because they've also brought across a large number of the team out of Brisbane, the Origin team based in Brisbane. So there was great continuity on that transfer of operatorship over to Tamron. And of course, they've Dave Close, who's been involved in the Beetaloo way back since 2013 and 2014, when we first got involved with Origin. And I would say it actually goes even further than that. When we sat down in Austin, Texas last month, myself, Tom and Anne, and you look around the room, it's not just about the experience within the Tamron team, but it's a vast experience within Brian Sheffield's Daily Waters Energy Company. Most of Brian's current team, they worked with him at Parsley Energy. So they know what success looks like. And more importantly, they know how to achieve it. And then Brian recently added Alex Cote, senior res engineer formerly at Origin, and he's been involved in the Beetaloo since, I think it's 2015. So you put all that team together with Tom Lehman, who sits on our board, and Tom has, he's overseen the drilling of 4,000 shale wells in the United States. You kind of have yourselves a team that would be the envy of, most of the major oil and gas companies. And added, I guess, to all of that is, the collaboration amongst all of this experience. That's kind of the magic sauce. It's this collaborative experience that will give us the highest possible chance of success. So no, I have absolutely no concerns whatsoever when it comes to the experience that hopefully will provide us all with the best chance of success going forward.
That's great. The next question that we have here asks, what is the likely timing with regards to the fracking operation?
Yeah, that's usually a tricky one. Well, one, because we don't want to promise too much, or two, because we're never really sure in terms of, the logistics around weather and mobilizing all this equipment to a remote location. But, we are planning our Tamron / Condor, we are planning to start fracking operations around the middle of February. That's what we're hoping to do. We could get a setback if the weather kind of changes materially between now and then. But as we are aiming for the middle of February, and we'll update the market as soon as we commence those operations. And once we get started in terms of the operation itself, it'll probably take 2 to 3 weeks to complete the 24 stages. You kind of typically do 1 to 2 stage per day, but allowing, let's say, 2 to 3 weeks. And then you kind of put the well on production, and you'll have your initial kind of cleanup of fluid, and you could allow up to, depending on Mother Nature, maybe another 2 to 3 weeks before you get your initial flow. So adding all of that up, we might get, initial flow rates by, let's say, end of March, heading towards then an IP rate, let's say, end of April.
Thank you very much for that, Philip. And perhaps a couple of questions that we have here which relate to flow rates. The first one reads as follows: what can we expect as a flow rate, and what would be considered a good flow rate?
Yeah, that's kind of one of the most important questions. And when I'm talking about flow rates, the flow rate I'm talking about is a kind of the IP 30-day rate measured over 1,000 meters. Bearing in mind we've got 1,275 meters of total horizontal, but the rate we're looking for is around 3,000 MCF per day, because we've run all our economics based on a 3,000 meter horizontal well, flowing circa 10,000 MCF a day. And based on that, that will drive an EUR of around 12 BCF. And using the gas prices that we know around in country or export prices, that that's a very good commercial flow rate. So it's 3 million a day or 3,000 MCF a day would certainly be considered a very good flow rate.
Thank you very much for that. And the second question relating to flow rates asks, I've seen Tamron refer to potential flow rates of 5 million scuffs of gas per day. So which is it? Is it 3 million or is it 5 million?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. Whoever asked that question. Yeah, Tamron does talk about potential flow rates of 5 million scuffs of gas as measured over 1,000 meters. But look, when I talk about the 3 million, I'm not talking about the potential flow rates. I'm talking about what Falcon considers to be a good rate and one that would take us into pilot development and ultimately full-scale development. Any rate above 3 million scuffs of gas a day, that's a real bonus. Yes, it is Tamron's what they're talking about in terms of potential, and hopefully we'll get there. But really, it's the 3 million number is what we see it as the kind of the green light to go forward with pilot development.
That's great. And just perhaps turning on to the next question we have here, reads as follows. Will the gas from these early horizontal test wells be produced? Are these wells designed so that they can potentially be re-entered and extended by the soon-to-be utilised H&P rig?
Yeah, so the plan would be all wells drilled from now on, including this munji well, will be tied back into production line, at some stage in the future. And that's the real focus of this new JV with Tamron. I mean, Tamron are all about getting into production by the end of 2024. So every well we drill going forward, as I said, including this one, it's all about hooking those into production. In terms of the second part of that question, re-entering and extending the 1,000 meter wells, simple answer to that is no, they're not set up for re-entry using the H&P rig, no.
Many thanks for that, Philip. And perhaps moving on to looking at the current plans for the JV in 2023, a question here reads, what are the 2023 drilling plans for the JV?
Yeah, that's an important question. As critically important as our flow results are from the Munji well, the Beetaloo, it's all going to be about the future drilling and moving the Beetaloo into commercial production. But look, even as a JV, we haven't finalized the 2023 drilling plans yet. I mean, we've had several discussions about them, but they haven't been finalized. Ideally, however, we'd like to see at least two more wells being drilled in the Beetaloo this year. And that would include, let's say, a 1,000 meter final well of stage 3, and then perhaps a 3,000 meter horizontal well drilled using this new H&P rig that's coming in from the US. But as soon as we finalize our going forward plans for 23, we'll be out and updating the market on what those plans look like. But like I said, hopefully we'll be drilling at least 2 wells for the remainder part of 2023.
Thank you very much for that, Philip. The next question that we have here reads as follows. Does Falcon have much input into where the next well will be drilled? And if so, what criteria determines the location of this next well, specifically locating on the current Amunji well pad or a step-out location?
Yeah, that's another good, interesting question. In terms of Falcon's input, as a JV, we meet regularly ourselves, Daily Waters, Tamron. We discuss, many operational issues, including things like well locations. Falcon together with Daily Waters, we can influence Tamron's decision-making process, and we certainly share with them our collective thoughts and experiences. But at the end of the day, Tamron are the operator, and they do have the final say, but we can have input into that final say, but it is the operator's final say. In terms of the second part of that question, in terms of location of the next well, as mentioned in our previous press release, the JV, we're still assessing various locations for this next well. A lot will depend on, what hopefully will be a successful outcome of the Amunji well, but also we'll take into consideration where might be, the best location for, an initial pilot development. And therefore, step-out locations, they're being seriously considered by the JV. But regardless of whether we step out or stay on the Amunji, we'll be staying within a similar play window and only targeting the Amunji member B shale for any near or medium-term future wells, with a view to moving any wells we do drill into production by the end of 2024.
Thank you very much for that, Philip. The next question that we have here talks to the company's current financial position and really asks, what is Falcon's current financial position? How much cash do you have left? When does the carry run out? And when does Falcon need to raise more money?
Okay, there's a few questions on that. Let me take each one of them separately. Firstly, our financial position. We've got $16.9 million US as at the end of September last. So we're in a pretty strong financial position still. In terms of the carry running out, bearing in mind Falcon has been carried since the beginning of 2014, so like 9 years ago, it's only inevitable that the carry will run out someday. And yeah, that day it's getting closer, but we're not there yet. It'll probably happen sometime before we complete the drilling and testing of this next well, the final stage 3 well this year. But then we still have plenty of financial resources to pay for any part of those well costs for which we're not carried. So we're still in a strong financial position. In terms of when does Falcon need to raise money, the short answer is that because of the financial flexibility we negotiated with the JV partners last October, we don't necessarily need to raise money. However, we may at some time in the future, choose to raise money, but that's only because we want to and not really because we need to.
And perhaps just a follow-on question I can see here, which asks, can you explain how this new 30 million Australian dollar carry works for Falcon?
Yeah, that's an easy one. The 30 million Aussie dollars, that's the gross value of a well that we're carried for, or actually over 2 wells, where Falcon doesn't contribute. So the net cash benefit to Falcon will be 22.5% of that 30 million. So the net cash to us is $6.75 million. And this cash credit is split over 2 wells. The first 3 million will be applied to that first well drilled after the last stage 3 well. So whatever our next well will be, the stage 3 well, then the well after that, we'll get a credit of 3 million. And then the balance of 3.75 million, that will be applied against the first well drilled post-June 2024.
Thank you very much for that, Philip. And perhaps a couple of final pre-submitted questions that we have here. Would you please tell us how important the opt-in or opt-out of the 6,400 acre blocks really is towards giving Falcon more flexibility, participating in future drilling plans, along with describing how the addition of that clause into the new JOA has given Falcon a great deal of protection from possibly being forced out of the Beetaloo by excessive capital outlays by the other parties to the JOA?
Yeah, thanks for that question. And I dealt with most of the aspects of this one during our last IM meeting. I'll give you a quick summary of it, but if anybody wants to go back to the previous recording of the IM meeting back in October, I think you'll get a fuller analysis. But the position for everyone regarding this opt-in or out scenario is that we negotiated a very favorable position. So we don't have to participate in any future well after this final stage 3 well. If we opt out, we're just out of a unit, let's say of up to 6,400 acres in size. We could potentially buy back in once that well has come in, and let's say it's very successful, but that would probably cost us something in the order of 3x the cost of that well. But if we opt out and stay out, we're only out of that 6,400 unit, and they may drill 10 up to 20 wells max in a unit like that. But you got to bear in mind, it sounds like a lot, but you got to bear in mind there's 718 units, of 6,400 acres each, making up this 4.6 million acres. So we really don't lose out by not participating in just, one unit. But the best part of the deal, actually, and I think it's the question poses it does give Falcon great protection against ever being forced out of the Beetaloo by excessive capital outlays by our partners. I mean, that just simply can't happen because of this financial flexibility we've negotiated.
Thank you very much for that, Philip. And perhaps before just moving on to the final pre-submitted question that we have here, may I just ask ladies and gentlemen on the call to continue to submit your questions, and we will look to address those after this one here. But perhaps the final pre-submitted question, Philip, as an investor in Falcon Australia, we got allocated shares. Are these available to trade now? And if so, where/which exchange?
Thank you. That'll be a shareholder from Falcon Australia Limited rather than the parent company that's quoted on the Canadian and London stock exchanges. Listen, you've got shares in the Australian sub, as I said. It's not a publicly traded company, so there is no readily available exchange to trade these shares on. You're a shareholder amongst, I think it's 85 shareholders representing 1.9% of Falcon Australia. The remainder of Falcon Australia, 98.1%, is held by the parent company Falcon Canada, or Falcon Oil and Gas Limited, but it's a Canadian company. If you want any further information, I think the simplest thing to do is make contact with the company's CFO and Flynn at any time in the future.
Philip, thank you very much for that. That's great. And as you can see there in the Q&A tab, we have received a number of questions throughout today's meeting. And thank you to all of those on the call for taking the time to submit their questions. Philip, if I could just hand back to you now just to respond to those questions where it's appropriate to do so. And then what I'll do is I'll pick up from you at the end. Thank you.
Okay, so Keith, I'm unclear what happens as a 22.5% shareholder with the gas that gets extracted. Do we just get it at the wellhead and we have to take it to market, or is there an arrangement for it to be sold via Tamron? There are no arrangements yet, but it's our gas to do with what we wish. So we can have our own offtake agreement, who will take that gas from us. Obviously, there'll be joint processing facilities that we would share with, Tamron stroke Daily Waters. But the actual gas itself, we do own the 22.5% of that. So that would be to our account to decide where we want to go. We can sell it along with Tamron, or we can, as I said, have our own offtake agreement. Next question is from Walter. As we are allowed to participate in some drilling sites or decline that site, can we sell chosen site options to a third party? That would get very complex and complicated if we weren't. I think the question is, if we don't participate, could we sell that on to somebody else? I think the short answer to that is no. But as I said, we're not looking to do piecemeal sales of our asset in Australia anyhow. So no, if we don't participate, the other parties, the JOA, would have the right to take up our interest. So Patrick asks, what cash can Falcon be asked to put up to continue the expansion of drilling production 23-24? In other words, can we be squeezed out? So I think I've answered that in an earlier question, that we can't. So yes, we've got a stage 3 well. We're fully funded for that. If they decide, to go off and drill, a whole bunch of wells and put up a major capex, I've said before in an earlier answer, we can't be squeezed out is the answer to that. David M. Philip, why haven't we seen greater consolidation in the sector? What needs to happen in terms of risk, resource, or commerciality to see more M&A? Well, to be honest, we don't want to see M&A just yet. We'd like to continue as we are into this year. Let's see these flow rates. Let's see how we get on with our drilling into this year and probably into next year before there's M&A. Consolidation, doesn't need to happen as per se. M&A, yes, in terms of other interested parties coming in. And I think what you'll find with the likes of Brian Sheffield having invested about $100 million US of his own money in the Beetaloo to date, you've got the huge H&P company, rig company coming in. We demonstrate good flow rates over the next couple of months. We're going to get a lot more interest from US oil companies, and you might then see a bit more M&A activity. But as I said, we don't want to see it just yet. Fleming E. Is Falcon Oil in contact with Impex? Is this a possible partner? Impex is a large Japanese oil and gas company. They operate Ichthys project in Darwin, which is a big LNG. It's about a 12 TCF gas field, shipping about 9 million tons. So they're a big big Japanese company operating in our backyard. Look, we know them, they know us. Is it a possible partner? Absolutely. Why wouldn't it be? As an exit route for gas from the Beetaloo to go via Darwin, that's not going down to the East Coast. We got 2 already ready to go facilities at Darwin. One is owned by Santos and the other is Impex. So yeah, they are a potential future partner. So I think that's all the questions I see. Jacob, so I can hand back to you.
Philip, absolutely. And thank you very much indeed for being so generous with your time and addressing all of those questions that were both pre-submitted, as well as those that came in during today's presentation as well. And of course, if there are any further questions that do come through, we'll make these available to you immediately after the presentation has ended for you to review, to then add any additional responses, of course, where it's appropriate to do so. Philip, perhaps before redirecting those on the call to provide you with their feedback, which I know is particularly important to yourself and the company, if I could please just ask you for a few closing comments to wrap up with, that would be great.
Yeah, thanks, Jake. And thanks everyone listening in today. Look, to be honest, we're entering, the most exciting phase in the history of Falcon's involvement in the Beetaloo. And we don't have too long to wait until we see these flow rates from the munji well. We know we've drilled a really, really good well, cased with 5.5-inch casing, all through the munji member B shale. We've just awarded a fracking contract to one of the best service companies in the industry that has the best equipment and personnel in country. And on top of that, we have a hugely experienced team, both at operator level and at JV level. So our confidence, on a successful outcome, couldn't be higher right now. And, I'll just leave you with this, but I really look forward to updating you all during our next IM meeting, which we'll hold shortly after, we announce these flow rates. And thank you all again for your attendance.
Philip, that's great. And thank you once again for updating investors this afternoon. Could I please ask investors not to close this session, as you'll now be automatically redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback in order that the management team can better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete, but I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of Falcon Oil and Gas Limited, we would like to thank you for attending today's presentation. That now concludes today's session, so good afternoon to you all.
Thank you.